Kamihia, kamihia, kamihia. We'll open our day with a karakia, no reira kia inoi tātou. He honore e korore ki tātua, mo tāna mai ngā rongo ki runga i te whenua e whakaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa. Āmine. He te atua, honua mātou pununga i tēnei rā ki te wairua tapu, ki te kororia, ki te ngākau tapatai. Kia whakanui a koe i runga i te ngākau rīpine tā. Me te whai atu no i a koe e pupuri mai nā te manaakitanga mō mātou. Api tia maitsa kina hoki o mātou tinana me o mātou wairua. Kia ata mōhio ai mātou ko koe a ihoa, kororia ki tō ingoa tapu. Āmine. Kia ora tātou. And welcome back to our Changemakers Webinar Series. This is a big shout out to everybody. Just before we kind of get into the kaupapa kōrero for the day, I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about the, our Changemakers / Hikitia Tāne Ora Wānanga that was hosted here in Tūranganuiākiwa on the 16th and 17th of October. It was a resounding success by our measures, all of our measures, and because one of the biggest measures for us is activation kaupapa. So one of the very last, after 2 days of talking about all of the things that go into prevention, all of the foundational pieces that we use as measures in this kind of mahi. We had our champions talking, we had different people from within Tūranganui and Te Rāwhiti talking about their experience within this mahi. And all of that kind of coalesced into one of, and because this is one of my favorite parts of our wānanga, which was an activation lab. And our room, we went around the room and we all kind of just shared an idea for something that we could do in the 100 days between now and whenever 100 days, which is, I think it's just after January. But something paku, something really, really small that can add some measurable colour or happiness or joy to our town and our rohe. And some of the ideas are real paku, like a chip and chat, where you go out onto a nine hole course. You play Ambrose, but the major point of the kaupapa was to talk to your mates, just have an opportunity to just have a chat with people. Another of the kaupapa was we have a lot of walkways in and around our taiao. And so one of the ideas was to get heaps of chalk together and give them out to whānau so that they can draw on the walkways that go around our town. And because those are measurable outcomes that we can say, yeah, we've added some kind of happiness to our town. Our wānanga went off. Our next one is planned for the end of November, 27th, 28th, I think it is, in Christchurch. More information will come out about this kaupapa, about this wānanga in the very near future. But coming back to our kaupapa kōrero the rā, I'd like to hand the rākau over to Jase Williams. He can introduce himself and he can have a little kōrero about who he is and his experiences. Tēnā koe, Jase.
Kia ora, everybody. I just got a notification on my screen that my internet is unstable. So as soon as I start talking, everything falls over. It could also be my teenage daughter in her room that may be on the internet when I told her not to. But anyway, welcome everybody. So I'm going to talk today about storytelling. And I really want to start with one of the first experiences I had out there talking about and sharing my story. And my background is in education. I've been an educator for the last 25 years. I spent 10 years as a school principal. So at the time, I was still working as a school principal, and I was also kind of part-time out there starting to talk about trauma-informed practice and relational neuroscience, stuff that I'd been engaged in and learning about for a little while, and I had some knowledge about, but certainly inexperienced in some ways as well. So people were becoming interested in hearing the story, so I had started to blend the science that I knew at the time, my own lived experience as an educator, and also bring in little bits and pieces of my own personal story and lived experience at the time. So I presented at the school, and I thought the session went really, really well, and my gauge of how well it went was the shocked look on faces, the tears in some people's eyes. But to me, in that moment, it meant there was a connection to this kaupapa and to this story, and a couple of hugs from people afterwards that were crying and sharing a little bit of their own lived experience. So I thought this seemed to land pretty well. People got it, and I seemed pretty happy with it. And then 2 weeks later, I received an email from a professional development facilitator that worked for the same PLD company I was kind of working alongside. And he said, "I've just been to the school you worked at, and there's some feedback that they asked me to give you." And the first thing I do is like, well, I didn't ask for feedback. And then my hurt inner child comes up. I didn't know the term at the time, but I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to receive this feedback. It's going to be good. And like a lot of feedback we receive, it was good, but there was one part that wasn't as good. And of course, that negativity bias and the way the brain's wired, you go to the negative part. So my only takeaway from that whole thing was that I relied on my notes too much. I was spending a lot of time looking at my screen rather than looking up and sharing the story with people. And that really hurt that feedback. I had these narratives made up in my mind. It's because I'm doing two jobs. I'm still a principal and doing this on the side. So, I did the best I could. I also had coming up for me that I wanted to get it perfect. So the notes were there, even though I knew the science, I was comfortable with what I was saying. I still wrote notes. I obviously knew, because I lived my own experience as a principal and educator, and also my own stories. I knew the stuff, but I wrote down notes because I wanted to make sure I did a real good job. But that really became the undoing of the whole thing, that I referred to the notes rather than just telling my story. If I fast forward now 5 years from that time, I've done a lot of work in that same school. The principal has now moved from Taupo and is now in Otatahi in Christchurch. And I'm booked in for 5 days with the school next year. So I must have been okay. But it was my insistence on trying to get it right and trying to be perfect that was actually the undoing. So I guess the message is really, ultimately, you want to embody this. This is your story. It's part of who you are. Yeah. And you speak and you present from your heart and from your guts. At the time, I was just trying to get it right. I was too much in the cortex, which obviously you need to connect and speak, and the knowledge is there, but not enough of the embodiment of it. So the embodiment comes with time. So that was kind of my first experience. And now I'm really, really privileged to speak every single day. I present and I speak and I tell my story, and the story has really, really evolved over time. There's occasionally there's times where, depending on my audience, that the story may change slightly, and that's something that I guess we have to think about, and we have to continue to tell our story with credibility and validity. And sometimes you hit the point where, because I speak for 5 hours a day, generally speaking, that's a long time to tell a story. And there's obviously breaks like morning tea and lunch in between here, but I've got a 5 hour block to share information, tell a story, and then you're offered keynote opportunities. And generally speaking, a keynote might be 45 minutes to an hour. So then you've got to decide, how much can I squash in of that corridor into this hour slot? Occasionally you get the opportunities where you've got a half an hour slot to really make an impact. So it's like, man, how can I make 5 hours that was hard to fit in 1 hour now fit into half an hour? Last weekend, I spoke at a suicide awareness event and fundraiser for a whānau here in Hawke's Bay, and I was given a 10-minute slot. I've just been given the video that I can chop up and cut up and use for my socials, and the timestamp on the video is 17 and a half minutes. So I went overtime 7.5 minutes, where it was okay for that event, but in other settings it wouldn't be okay, and it would cut into other people's time. But I was really, really unaware. I was unaware because I was embodied. I was in the moment presenting, and that is ultimately where you want to go to. But also you lose kind of track of awareness. So the best storytelling I've ever done is when I'm just in it. In Gizzy last week, there were points of time when I was speaking where I was just unaware of anything that was even happening. It's a good place to be, because it's now embodied and I'm sharing and presenting. So yeah, that's what's coming up for me at the moment, Horny.
Tēnā koe, Brenda. I just wanted to kind of go back to something that you were talking about, and it has a lot to do with this embodied kind of whakaaro that you keep bringing up. And you also mentioned there was a pressure to kind of squeeze or condense an amazing amount of information into the 10 or to the 30 or into an hour. So what are some of the kind of tools that you've used, or what kind of experience do you bring forth when you're trying to cut down what is essentially your story into this manageable kind of morsel for people when you go to present?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think I look at the audience first, and I'm like, okay, with this particular audience, what do I want them to take away from my kōrero? What will have the greatest impact in the time that I have? What are the personal stories that I feel are going to create the most impact? Is there anything polarizing that I might say that may detract from the message that I want them to take away? And what I do is polarizing, and a lot of it is opinions, some of it is scientific, but yeah, it's really thinking about your audience and what do you want them to take away? How much time do I have, and what's the greatest impact I can have? And often for me, it's like, okay, in a half an hour slot, what are the 3 things I want people to take away? 3 big things that when they leave this is what they take away. And to get those 3 big things, what are the stories I'm going to tell in order for them to connect? If I think back to early in my in the season of my life where presenting this mahi, there was some feedback that Jase just talks about his stories. And again, that hurt at the time. It's like, you're not connecting with what I'm really saying because the actual message is in the story. I think now, though, with some experience and time doing this, it's a much more visible to people. It was visible to me because it's my bloody story, but maybe not always visible to the people hearing on the other side, right? So we have to consider that what we put out there may not be how it's received on the other end. And sometimes we don't spend enough time thinking about that. So, yeah, and again, you can't control how someone receives it on the other end because that's based on their own story, their lived experience, the level of cognitive dissonance. Like is this gonna hit and impact their values and belief systems? And when you are playing with people's values and belief systems, it's unsettling for people. It's one of the most destabilizing things for any human being is having your values and beliefs challenged. So part of what I do at the beginning of my kōrero is address that. And the way I do that is I use a quote from Maya Angelou, and she says that essentially it's once we know better, we do better. And I use that quote, and that generally sits pretty well with most audiences, parents, educators, doesn't matter who I speak to, gang members, it kind of, people get it. But then I qualify that with a story. And the story I share is about an experience with my son. I was in Chicago. I received a text on my phone. I was over there for mahi. I received a text on my phone, and it said, "Happy Father's Day. I love you. I'm proud of the man you are now." And the story I tell is how I sat on the edge of my bed that morning, just crying, receiving these beautiful words from my son. And I cried because he acknowledged Father's Day. And when I think about years past, I never received those texts from my son. So my cognitive dissonance convinced me that my son didn't know what Father's Day was because I could cope with that. My cognitive dissonance said my son obviously didn't see the ads on TV from Farmers, Warehouse, Kmart. All these things we tell ourselves to detract from the actual what's really happening because I couldn't cope with that in that moment. So you tell yourself these things, your brain tells yourself these things. So I'm sharing then and there to people that there are likely going to be some things I'm going to say that may unsettle your values and belief systems, right? So it's kind of the seeds I'm planting in that moment. And then I talk about the next sentence from my son, I love you. Then I go into, as a child, I never heard those words growing up. So you start bringing people in with that because that kind of hits on people's heartstrings. You also in that moment have those people in the audience that also didn't receive those words growing up. So they're either leaning in because they want to know, why did we not receive them? Or they're arms folded stepping back because it's too much for them in that moment, right? So you're reading the audience. And sometimes when we're early in telling our stories, that can be really off-putting. People moving around while we're speaking. again spoke at a suicide awareness event the other day, and the whānau that run it, they made because there was some drinks, people were drinking there, and they made sure the bar was closed while the speakers were up, because they wanted people to be engaged and settled. And that was really, really cool. What I found out later was that the whānau knew I didn't drink, and they thought it was disrespectful that people were going to drink. And I said that there's a reason I drink, and that's to do with my own stuff, but it has nothing to do with you guys. If you want to drink or feel the need to drink, you can do your thing. But it made people lean in. People leaned in. I remember listening to Bessel van der Kolk. Well, Bessel van der Kolk wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And he said when he's speaking, it's polarizing. And when people start moving forward, he goes, they're interested. He said when people start leaning back and perhaps arms are folded, he goes, they're not quite sure and they're questioning. So he found his kind of goal was keeping an eye on the people with their arms folded and seeing if he can get them to relax a little bit and get into the story. So the last sentence about that, Cordero, I would share, I'm proud of the man you are now. And I'd say, what kind of dick was I before then if you're really connecting with me now? And I share that vulnerable story to open up the room so people are drawn in, hopefully, to the corridor. But I've also planted the seeds that there are going to be some things we're going to talk about again that may unsettle you. But I want you to try and stay curious, which is interesting because it's really hard to stay curious if you're unsettled. It's almost impossible. But I say to people, like, when you leave the space and you have some time to yourself in a calm, safe space for you to be on, reflect on why you might feel that way. And then I say, well, it doesn't mean that your values and belief systems are wrong or fractured or need rewiring. All I'm saying is, why do you feel that way? So reflect on that, right? So I've kind of spent that first couple of minutes really planting seeds, but also educating at the same time. And that seems to go over reasonably well. And I think it's the quote from Maya Angelou that does it. It's visible, it's on a screen. So I'm someone that doesn't use, I know some speakers will use 1,000 slides when they speak. I think it detracts from the message. So I think the key is having a good little group of slides that are impactful. And I would leave that one up there for 5-10 minutes of that half an hour corridor, because I want people to take that away. But also, as I'm speaking, as you become unsettled, that's still in your visual. Hopefully you can still connect with that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that, brother. It's really insightful to hear from your personal experience about how you've used these situations or these opportunities that you've had and segue those into kind of learning experiences that you've added to your story and your waidua over the time that you've been doing this, mate. So before our webinar started, we spoke about how to keep people engaged. And because having engagement is pretty much it's when it comes to mai kōrero or public speaking and all that kind of stuff. So what do you think makes a story helpful or hopeful for other people? And how can you share it in a way that connects people rather than divide?
Great question. If I think back to when I did a TEDx talk, I thought I had some kind of idea how it worked. So I watched a number of them. I thought about how I want mine to work. So I think a good story, much like when we were kids at primary school, we wrote stories, has a beginning, middle, and an end. And it has kind of like peaks and valleys and those kind of things. You bring people up and then you kind of bring them down and you bring them up again. So I think it really follows that same process. I know with my TEDx, there were things I said at the beginning that I hit again in the middle. And so we're talking like a 13-minute kōrero there. So in that first 90 seconds, there was something I talked about. Around about 7 minutes in, I kind of went back to it and it came full circle at the end. So to me, that's a really good story when it has a strong beginning, middle, and an end. And if you can tie it up and come full circle, that's even more powerful. So I've tried to use my, especially keynote speeches, the hour or the half an hours, I've tried to plan them out and have that procedure look like that. When I've got that 5 hours, I have a procedure there too. The first block, which is an hour and a half, I'm going to talk about how I was a principal at school and things we did. Second block, I spend half of the second block talking about te ao Māori and how when we think about trauma, we already knew and did all this stuff, and here are our stories to prove it. And then I go into here are the links to the science. Now, was in neuroscience. Now, I used to do it the other way because I didn't have the grounding in Te Ao Māori. So I would talk about, here's the neuroscience and what it says. And I remember speaking in Christchurch at an event for Matt and Sarah Brown, and a lady said to me, where's the relevance? Where's the link to Te Ao Māori? And I kind of fumbled through a response because it was there, but it wasn't as obvious or visible or as in-depth as it needed to be for the audience. So I was like, right, I've got to go do some work around that. So I did. So it's come full circle again when now I lead with Te Ao Māori, and it feels more organic and natural and authentic for me now, because before it was more performative. You know, I'd learned some things, so I'm going to throw them in there. But if someone ever questioned me, I'll be like, oh, shit. This is what I read somewhere, you know? So I think one thing we also have to do is, when we become more comfortable as storytellers is it shouldn't be performative. It needs to be authentic, and it needs to be organic, and it has to be real. I know I've heard Matt Brown speak so many times, and Matt says, you know, people have a real strong bullshit detector. And if you think about relational neuroscience, we call it neuroception, that our body's scanning all the time for threats. And if something feels off, we have that strong gut instinct, and the heart will tell us that feels off, it's red flags. So people can tell if your story is manufactured. People can tell if it's largely written by ChatGPT. Like, seriously, ChatGPT, AI is an amazing tool. Use it as a tool. Don't let it create your entire corridor, though, because then people will know it's not you. And then to do a good job with your AI chat, then you'll be performative about it. So yeah, we'll get to the point where it becomes embodied and it's authentic and it's organic. And I had some feedback last night. I spoke to an ECE audience, and a lady had heard me a year ago, and she said, you looked really comfortable up there today. My negativity bias goes, was I uncomfortable last time? Or did I did a poor job last time? But I didn't say that. And she said to me, yeah, it just seemed real. There's a real good flow to it. And for me, that's like the coolest feedback I can get. It's like, yes, I'm growing. I'm getting better at doing this stuff. So that happens with practice. Time takes practice. And the more I've practiced and the more I've become comfortable with the knowledge, then it becomes embodied. And then the storytelling is organic and authentic and natural. And then people feel it. Sometimes people just hear it. Now they're feeling it. And they're feeling it because I'm feeling it. So it might be a little bit woo-woo, but yeah, I think it needs to be embodied, right? So I think that comes with practice, time, and yeah, because, you know, we work in a space where people have this strong lived experience and really want to tell their story, and we should.
Yes.
And we just need to make sure that it's authentic. I heard Jeremy Eparaima. I had the privilege of sitting and hearing Jeremy tell his story, but also sitting with him at a table and talking about storytelling. And he said that he was before he told his story, he wanted to make sure that it was authentic. So he asked permission of people that he wanted to talk about in the story. A, did he have permission to share this corridor? And B, is what I'm saying accurate? Is this how you perceived and remembered those moments? And the response was yes, that is how I received it. So I think there does have to be an element of gaining permission from people. If we're putting people and scenarios in our stories, we do need to make sure, because again, our lived experience remembers the story in a certain way. That doesn't mean it was received or experienced that same way by the other people we want to talk about in the story. So we really need to do that. Like I had my daughter with me, she's 17, the other night when I spoke at the event. And in the middle of it, I was talking about, you know, unconditional love and just making sure you're a safe place for your family. And I was like, oh shit, I'm saying this and my daughter is literally in the room. So I thought, because I'm vulnerable enough to do it and I have enough experience doing this and I feel comfortable, hey honey, is that how you feel? And she looked embarrassed, and I was like, oh shit, I just called you out in front of a couple of hundred people.
Yeah.
But it made me think in the moment, like, I'm saying all this stuff, and am I being performative now? You know, I look back at my TED Talks and it was embodied, but I was like, that was like a year ago, and the growth I've had since then, I feel it's been massive. I remember talking with Richie Hardcore maybe about a year ago when I had a TED Talks, and I was trying to pick his brain and Matt's brain, and Richie said, something along the lines of, he'll correct me if I'm wrong, so I was sure, but you know, he kind of cringes when he looks back at the TEDx, because his TEDx was maybe 8 years ago. It was a while back, and he cringes at it now when he looks back on it. But and I feel like that with some podcasts I've been on, because you know, when I was a principal, I was in it. Now I'm out of that. I have a almost a completely polar opposite view of the education system. Now I'm out of it. But that's how I felt then. That's what I thought then. So that's what I presented then. And I think it's we shouldn't, we can cringe at it if you want, but it's like, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
And then we grow, and that's where we're at now. And how I'm speaking today, if we did this in a year's time, it'd be different. You know, there's growth that happens. So with our stories, over time, we should see that growth. Like I know some people that present and speak, and their story they tell today is almost exactly the same story as 10 years ago.
Word for word.
People are still paying to see them. So people want to hear that kōrero, but I'm like, you want to see some kind of growth and evolving in it. But I mean, if you're getting paid to say the same thing and people keep paying you, I get it on one hand, but you know, I'd like to see the growth.
I am whenever I find myself in conversations with either any of the champions, I am constantly reminded of Vic Tamati, and so there was how he said it, and then there was the other version, and this is the more well-known mantra for Safe Man, Safe Family. Yes. It's peer-led, professionally supported. So if I think about this in from the Changemakers perspective, the Changemakers are the peers, and so we're using each other to lead this kaupapa, and then the champions are coming in and supporting in whatever way. And so these webinars, these wānanga that we're having, these are all kind of from that vein of kōrero. There's always been a part of me that has, like, I have to be socially and culturally aware of my mahi, of who I am as a person, where I am, and all of that kind of stuff. And so is adjust the right first? Is adjust your story the right word? Or what do you need to change to be more culturally aware or more socially aware of the groups that you're speaking to? How do you manage that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think ultimately you do want to be aware. I think one of the kōrero we had in Gisborne, or part of all of our kōrero, was that, self-awareness seems to be quite rare. People aren't aware of how they are and how they're perceived in lots of cases. So I think for me, I guess I fell on my face a few times in Christchurch when the lady called me out, like, how's that Te Ao Māori? And where's the depth in this? And so it made me go away and reflect and think about it. I really think you do have to be. I also think that if you are honest and authentic, that people will be compassionate and empathetic towards you. I say that as someone who is obviously Māori, but doesn't kōrero Māori. And when I share as part of my kōrero that is very much part of the trauma, my own sense of belonging or lack thereof, people understand as it comes through the story, because there are things I would love to say and do that at this point in time in my life I'm not able to yet. So I think weaving that into the story again, but it comes from my awareness. Like, I'm aware of how I am and where I am and what I'd love to be able to do and what maybe people even need me to do. So how do I weave that into the story? And that brings people along for that ride as well, because I know when I share my kōrero about being Māori and being not feeling like I belong as a Māori in Māori spaces, but as a Māori in Pākehā spaces, I know I'm not the only one in the room that feels that, right? So I think that's important to share that kōrero out there. And it's not that I'm wanting empathy and compassion, but I would love to be able to do those things, but I'm aware. So I think it really is like, who is my audience? How am I going to show up for that audience? Not performative wise, but how am I going to show up? Am I showing up as me? Because if I'm not showing up as me, then who am I? And if you show up as someone else and try to be someone else, everyone's going to feel it and read it. So yeah, just developing that self-awareness. Sometimes it involves doing a bit of research on where you are, and also talking to the people that are bringing you there. Like, what do they want from me? Do they want me to tell my story, or would they rather me kind of bring up a few key points and then have time for questions? Would they rather hear my experience in that way? So I think it's doing a little bit of homework, understanding what people actually want from you is really, really important. But self-awareness to me is being honest with yourself. It's looking in the mirror and saying, this is who I am. And they want this from me, but that's not me. So maybe that mahi is not for me today, or maybe I can do the mahi, but I'm going to approach it in this way so people understand as well. Does that kind of make sense?
I mean, technically, yes.
Yeah.
But it all comes back to, so the whole, let's start with that first part. Let's be honest with ourselves. Let's look ourselves in the mirror and have that conversation. Am I genuinely feeling this today?
Yeah.
That's a really, really, really difficult thing to do. As we know, like, I work with people who are in denial of their life in the way that it has been lived up until now. And so what are some of the things, or what are some of the phrases, the tools that I can give to people who are struggling with seeing themselves in the mirror and like saying, hey, I need to do this. This is something I need to do either for myself or for the people that I'm talking to, or that kind of stuff. What are some things that we can give to those people?
Yeah, so for me, the lack of self-awareness only changed with a conversation with my wife. She told me how I was. Trust me, I wasn't ready to hear it. I thought it was all good, but it needed to happen, right? So I would advise people to sit in the space with the people they love the most and ask them. You got to prepare yourself mentally and emotionally as well. You're not going to like probably what you're going to hear. But I sat with my wife that day and she told me exactly how I was and what I needed to do. And she'd been waiting a very, very long time to have that conversation and waiting for me to change. But it was the start of a change. And we navigated our way through that conversation. And then my son turns up at home. I was like, shit, now it's part two. I'm going to navigate that situation as well. So I think it's talking with the people we love, because they know us better than we know ourselves. They see the real us, right? We can, and I've learned this, we can look in the mirror as human beings and we will see the reflection staring back at us that we want to see, right? There's a kōrero that I tell often, and my first year teaching as a principal, my first year teaching was at a little school called Flaxmere School in Hastings, and the principal at the time, Pākehā guide Mike Flynn, and he told this kōrero on staff only day, my first, induction into teaching. And he told the story of his Christmas Day. And the Christmas Day story goes like this. Everyone's having fun. His nephew is walking around with a handheld video camera. There's no cell phones back in those days. And he's recording the entire Christmas Day. And he says it was lots of fun and everyone's enjoying themselves. And he said at the end of the night, we all sat down as a family and we watched this video. Everyone's laughing and hysterics about the silly things they did and said on camera. And he said he sat there stunned, frozen. And then he shared with us it was the first time he realized that he was a short, fat, red-haired, red-faced Irishman. We all sat there looking at him like, yep, that's what you look like. He was unaware, right? And that story, 28 years old, 25 years old, sorry, I still remember it, right? And that was my introduction into, we may think we are this person, but this is who we are to everybody else. When my son said to me, I'm proud of the man you are now, that's what I said, what do you mean now? Like, I just wasn't ready to receive that at the time, right? So I think that self-awareness, in my experience at least, I had to hear it from other people because I thought I was all good. So hearing it from people I love the most, but be prepared that it's not going to feel very nice. But if we are about that change, then we got to sit in those uncomfortable places and spaces. And people don't say these things to hurt you; they say them because they want you to be the best version of yourself. And which brings another kōrero. I got a text from a good friend of mine who's a teacher, and she said to me, "We're struggling with a couple of young boys, 12, 13-year-old boys. We really want them to be the best versions of themselves. What do we do? What are some strategies? What are some tips?" I said, "I don't have any." She goes, "Really?" I said, "I can tell you what you need to do, though." She said, "Okay, what's that?" I said, "You need to show up as the best version of yourself." She said, "But what about the kids?" "No, you need to turn up as the best version of yourself. In particular, when those kids are at their worst and are doing whatever annoying things they're doing, you show up as the best version of yourself. And in time, they will mimic, mirror, copy off your modeling. They will be the best version of themselves. So yes, sit with the people you love, be prepared for a rocky road and ride. But to me, that's what brought that self-awareness to me. I was like, wow, what do you mean I'm like that?
Mm. Wow. Thank you for sharing that incredibly personal story. Kia ora whānau, I just want to highlight, if you want to if you have any partai, please add them into the chat function. We'll get onto the Q&A in about 5 to 10 minutes or so. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. It's been a while. So going back to storytelling, has there been a moment in time where all this kōrero that we've spoken about has come together in the most impactful way? So has there been like one kind of maybe a speech or a moment or when you got called out to a kura where it all just kind of worked?
Yeah, I was over in Sydney at an event with Matt and Sarah Brown a month or two ago. And I followed Matt, and it's hard to follow Matt. It's hard. But I went on and I told my story. So I had, I think, about an hour and a quarter. So I did my thing, and I was just in my flow. And when I'm in my flow, I forget there's anyone even in front of me. It's quite a weird feeling. I don't always feel that, but I was oblivious to anyone even being there. I was just in the flow. The words were coming to me really easily. And a slide come up. So in this particular venue, on the back wall, so I'm facing, I can see the back wall right where I'm facing. So my slides are up there, so I can see what's on the screen behind me, which is a good, it was cool to see that. And a slide came up, and in my head was like, here's my opportunity to share how important Matt and Sarah Brown are to me. Off the cuff, not planned, embodied. And I did it. Next minute, in front of a couple of hundred people, I'm bawling my eyes out on stage. That's not planned. That's embodied, and I just say to people that wasn't performative or practice, and I wasn't thinking about that. But that's what happens though when you're in the moment. It's very authentic and it's very real. I remember speaking in Gizzy the other week. Something got me then too. There's something when you're in the flow of things, because you are moving through brain states as well, right? So you're in that prefrontal cortex where the knowledge sits, where the information lives, and you're communicating with other human beings. So the knowledge is then you drop down to that emotional brain with some of the kōrero you were saying. So you think about Modi, we're going through this flowing between states and flowing between brain states as well. And sometimes it just gets you. And I'm okay with sitting in that space, even in front of hundreds of people. I don't care if I'm crying. I'm also modeling now, so okay to cry. Big brown man crying in the space, it's all good. But yeah, so I think that's an example of once. The other space to me where it flows is when I was speaking on marae. I'm in the wharenui and I'm working with whānau. Just something about the space allows authentic, organic conversations to happen. Anything goes. I do the same kōrero in school halls. I like to think it's the same. It's not. It's not the same. The feeling's not the same. It just creates a sense of, for at least for me, a sense of safety in that space, which is interesting because of my lack of sense of belonging and connection. I haven't always felt that way about that space, but now it certainly feels like the space to have those kōrero with whānau. I mean, I make do with the school hall if that's what I've got, but I think anytime I'm in those spaces, it feels very organic and very authentic, just to truly be me. Another example was I was speaking yesterday with a principal and 2 staff members in Taupo, and it was a very open and honest and vulnerable conversation. And I shared a story that I've probably shared 3 or 4 times in my life because I'm still embarrassed and shamed by the story about how I was. I said it yesterday because it felt like I could say it. And when I said it, it was received in probably the best way it's ever been received as well. So I'm listening to what my heart and my gut says, that it's okay to share this part of the kōrero here. I will be in other spaces. I was, I'll say it. I was on the North Shore in Auckland talking to a whole bunch of principals. I couldn't have said it there. Might have been a phone call to police or like a tamariki or something in that space if I shared that kōrero there, right? but I felt safe in the other space to share that call letter. So I think sometimes it's just following your heart and gut, which you heard me speak in Gisborne. We don't always know how to find it if that's been conditioned out of us to use our body and think about our body.
There's a massive amount of trust that you have to have, firstly within yourself, and then the spaces that you find yourself in. So this North Shore, the difference between this North Shore hui and this Taupō hui are pretty opposite. Just to kind of, because this is something that I'm really, really passionate about, our marae are designed in a specific way to elicit certain whakaaro within us. We're supposed to feel safe in our marae. We see our tipuna all along the walls, and they stand as the bodyguards for everything else, but they look inward. They look inward at us, and we reflect them and their lives back to them. We're going to move on to the Q&A part. Thank you, brother, for your kōrero. We're going to take this first partai, but please feel free to add any other partai or questions that you have into the chat. I'll shoot them over to Jase, and then we'll go from there. This partai is from Christy. Tēnā koe, Christy. For changemakers starting out, how would you suggest they develop their stories before they speak publicly? Who would you suggest they get around them?
Great question, Christy. I think starting with that story, like start with the beginning, middle, and ends. I would start really basic. I would also lean on having slides, because I think when you have slides, people will look at the slides, so you don't have all eyes on you, and until you get more comfortable with people staring at you while you're speaking. Even yesterday, like the tech wasn't working, and in my head is, okay, everyone's going to stare at me for the next hour and a half. So I think beginning, it's like, okay, if I don't feel comfortable standing in front of an audience, but I do want to share my story, maybe have some slides that will take the attention off me. And when we have those slides as well, we need to make real sure there's not a lot of words on them, because as we're speaking, people will read the words and not hear the message that we're saying. So just some slides that you think we're engaging, where people can connect with that visually, but also still take in the kōrero. So beginning, middle, and end, have a story. I was talking with Daniel Fairbrother recently about trying to shape and craft a story, and I remember the kōrero we had, and I think back to when I did a podcast with him, was a real pivotal moment that he spoke about, and then he sent me through some photos as well, and I was like, boom, that's how you start the kōrero, bro. So I messaged him and said, hey, the photos you sent and this kōrero you've been saying, that's how you start it. That would be such a powerful beginning. Somewhere in the middle, let's go back to it somewhere, and let's come full circle at the end about the growth and ultimately the redemption story. And he's like, oh, bro, that sounds mean. And then I was like, hang on, stop. It's not my story to tell. It's his story to tell. So if he doesn't feel it, if it doesn't feel embodied for him and doesn't feel authentic and natural, he's going to perform that part of the story. And that's not what we want. So I said, bro, you know what I just said? He goes, yes, I don't listen to a word I said. you craft your story, how you craft your story. And if you want any feedback after, I can give it to you. And again, you don't have to listen. So as far as who you get around you, people that have some experience, but again, listen to the advice. That doesn't mean you have to act upon it as well. So if what the advice you're getting doesn't feel right, don't do it. If it feels like, yeah, I think that feels really good, then go with it. Get people around you that have had that experience. You don't necessarily have to go to like Toastmasters or any of those kind of formal speaking things. I know when I did my TEDx talk, because I'm someone who speaks every day in front of audiences, so I feel like I'm at least okay at it. And then I had a voice speaking coach who'd worked on Shortland Street and with other speakers. And once I worked with her, I'm like, shit, I can see why I needed this. I had no clue that I wasn't doing this and I wasn't moving. I think another key thing is think about how you're going to do the kōrero. Like, are you going to have a microphone? And is it a microphone you're holding? Is it a fixed microphone that's like on a stand? Is it a microphone that's a headset microphone? Or is there no microphone and you've got to project your voice? All that stuff matters. At my kōrero last Friday, they went to give me a handheld mic. And the first thing I did was I said, can everyone down the back hear me? Clearly, like, yeah. I said, okay, put the mic down. Because I use my hands lots when I talk. Yep. And I know from experience that the mic should be here in my hand, but I'll have it over here and it'll be over there. So I'm like, I'm not using it anyway.
Yep.
So I've learned from that. So become comfortable in whatever way you're doing it. So largely I speak with no mic, or I have a fixed mic or a head mic, but holding a microphone feels really unnatural for me.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it as well. Becoming comfortable with how you're telling your story. So beginning, middle, and end. Get people around you that have experience. Doesn't mean you have to listen to the advice if it doesn't feel right. But also know that, don't try not to make the mistake I made where you write this perfect story and then you try and read a perfect story, because that's not anyone can read a story. People want to see you and hear from you, and if you are reading a story, they could have read that themselves. You could have emailed it to them.
Yep.
Right. So because they want to feel it, they want to feel the emotion, the peaks and valleys of the stories that you bring in. Now, one thing I noticed in the podcast we did together last week was when we were having this kōrero together, four of us, when it was Matt's turn to speak, there was a pause, like this silence, and we sat in the silence, and you watched his brain ticking over. And then he said something really profound. So a pause is really impactful when you tell stories.
Yeah.
Just that pause, it gives people a chance to settle into their bodies, knowing that maybe something real heavy is going to come. And that comes with time. Like the first few times I told my story, I probably practiced it at home and it went for half an hour. When I told it in real life on that day, it went for 15 minutes because I'm racing through it to get off the stage. It just takes lots and lots of practice, and you're going to get it wrong, and that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you for your pātau, Christy. Moving on to our next pātau from Alexander Stevens up in Tāmaki Makaurau. And so when do you think your journey transitioning from storytelling, what we're currently doing, to pūrākau will occur? They are different from Alexander's whakaaro. Yeah. So where do you think you'll be transitioning from the storytelling mahi that you're doing into pūrākau? They are different.
Yeah, definitely. I try to fuse and blend them. So I listen and soak up the pūrākau when I hear them, when I'm around people that tell them. A lot of the kōrero I've got is via online. So Matua Mark Kopua had a mahi atua, an online resource where you could pay whatever it costs, and he told these stories. What I love about Matua Mark is the way he tells the story. It's not just the story, it's the way he tells it. It's beautiful the way he tells it. And he is very calm and very measured, and it's impactful. So I try and take the parts that make sense to me that I can blend with the storytelling, my own lived experience, and also the relational neuroscience that I've learned, and try and blend them together. I feel the more I'm around people that know a lot more about me and Te Ao Māori in those spaces, the more I soak that up. Ultimately, I would love to just speak pūrākau. That would be it's a real aspirational goal for me, and I hope I get there in time. And yeah, absolutely, difference between storytelling and pūrākau, there really is. At the moment, what I'm liking is that I am, I've written a book, and hopefully coming out end of March next year. And in that book, I initially thought I was going to talk about relational neuroscience from a relatable standpoint, to make all the science that can be really complicated easily accessible to everybody. So that was the goal. And I'll probably use a couple of stories to accentuate the science. When I started writing it, I told a whole bunch of stories with a little bit of science sprinkled in. So it's completely the opposite of what I thought it was going to be. So the storytelling to me is something I feel I'm pretty good at. I feel like people relate and connect to it. And through the storytelling, I try and bring in all the complex concepts and stuff relatable. So I think I'll probably just keep telling the stories for now. And as I grow and evolve and advance in my knowledge of Te Ao Māori and pūrākau, the balance may change over time. But certainly if I think back to like 5 years ago, the seesaw was like that. And now it's kind of like that a little bit. Yeah. Cool question.
Yeah.
Hopefully he's not from the North Shore.
I no comment. I don't think Alexander would mind either.
No, good.
Mark Kopua, so he grew up in Kaiti. Kaiti is a low decile area in Turanganui. But in the 60s, there were a couple of streets they're named after places in England. These are places like Oxford, Cambridge, Glasgow, all of those kinds of things. But these are all different whare wānanga of their own. So people who grew up on these streets, it was hard. People were poor. They had to go through all these hard things, but the marae was right there. And so these kids in the 60s, they all grew up at the marae. This is ones like Mark Korpua, Derek Lardalia, probably the two that we would speak about most glowingly, just because of how they've been able to use their experience growing up this harder way, and turning that into something like meaningful and supportive of the local community and the wider community of Aotearoa. So to hear you talk about Uncle Mark, because that's what he is. He's just what he is. His mahi art stuff comes across, it hits for everyone because it's relatable to people. And so to kind of hit on one of the other points that you made about the science being kind of out of reach for the common person, for the person who doesn't really consider neuroscience as something that they would want to know about. The story and having it woven into there in really easy, hittable ways will be a really cool story to hear about. So thank you for your give us a little bit more information about your book, brother.
My book? So I'm currently titled Trauma Has a Whakapapa. It's lived experience. It's the chapters kind of flow. So I've just sent a chapter to a good friend of mine to read, and the chapter I sent him was connection has been weaponized. And I'm talking about in parenting and society, just in so many ways. And then that flows into, I can't remember what I've called the next chapter, but it's essentially how the education system is like prison. So it's quite polarizing, right? So I'm trying to, I've really stepped outside myself and looked at our systems. And it's fair to say the publishing companies aren't touching it because it's polarizing, right? And to me, like I was upset at the time. So this is a real good book, and I know in the space, because I've read all the books in the space, and I'm like, this is something different, and I know it's needed by people, and it's accessible to Māori in particular. So there's a whole bunch of Te Ao Māori coming through it. Heaps of kupu Māori in there as well. It's been a learning journey for me, and lots of pūrākau in there. They weave through it, and they same thing, beginning, middle, end. I keep coming back to them through chapters. But yeah, it's polarizing for people, right? So I think back to my own personal story. I've always had to do it by myself. I've never belonged. So here's just another example. But now I can see it like I get to publish my book in my way with my words, and it's authentic and it's organic. And the people that will connect with it will consume it, and the people that don't won't anyway. So it'll cost a little bit of money, but I mean, it's I'm excited to get it out there. So currently, Trauma Has a Whakapapa. There's other titles I'm thinking of is Seen, as an SEEN, Seen is another one. I like Belonging, but I know there's a number of books called Belonging that are out there. So at the moment, Trauma Has a Whakapapa because it didn't start with us. Is really the kaupapa behind that. And there's actually a book called It Didn't Start With Us. I can't bloody use that either. I've read all the books.
Well, no, because that goes back to one of the points you made about doing your research about the things that you talk about, so that you can embody the information that you're sharing with people, and you're not coming up short or not having that confronting conversation with their corker that asks you, what do you know about that? And so then you can find yourself in that situation. A part-time from Graham, is the book out yet, or are you still publishing?
Oh, it's fully written. I've sent it to a lady in America. So she is writing the foreword. Her name is Laurie Desautels, and I regard as the world's leading expert in relational neuroscience and education. So she's actually coming here to Aotearoa next March. I'm bringing her over, coming to Napier only. So she's doing the foreword, and my good friends Matt and Sarah Brown are writing one as well for the book. So it's fully written. I just going through the process of publishing soon. So it should be out end of March next year. And I'll end up, it'll be on my social media and through my website is how I'll sell it. Yeah.
Well, if there aren't any more part-time, firstly, a big mihi to you, Jase. Mihi ana mō kōrero, mihi ana mō māramatanga, mō ngā āhuatanga ko tāpirihia ki tēnei rōpu. Secondly, out to everybody, big mihi to you for showing up today. I realized pretty late that I didn't actually send out the reminder email last week on Friday, which would have primed this hui. But to be fair, I was just too tired after our wānanga here in Turanga. So I just trusted that you knew that every second Thursday we would be having our wānanga, and you all turned up. So tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou.
Oni, can I just jump in quickly, bro? Just shout out to Latu. I don't know you personally, brother, but Linda Knight is a very good friend of mine, and she speaks glowingly about you. And yeah, she really loves working alongside you. So malo also.
Right. Yeah. Kautia ngā mihi reira, ka whakakapi tō tātou hui te karakia no reira kia inoi tātou. E te atua, whakatuwhera tau mai kia mātou ngā huarahi o te tika, te ora, te pono, te kaha, me te māramatanga. Mā mātou koe whakamoimiti, e whakakoria ki tō ingoa tapu. Āmine. Kia ora everybody. Have a great week and a great weekend. Stay on the line, Jess.
Yeah.
Thank you, brother.